Welcome to the debate. So, I want you to imagine that you are dropped right into the middle of a dense, totally unforgiving jungle, and you're offered a choice before you even take your first step into the brush. You can either have this, meticulously detailed map of the terrain showing every hidden pitfall, every elevation change, secret paths, all of that. Or you can have a massive, immediate supply of food, fuel, and survival gear. Which do you choose?
I mean, it's the ultimate survival dilemma, isn't it? The map gives you direction and context, sure, but the supplies keep you alive long enough to actually take a step. Without the fuel, you're really just sitting there staring at a piece of paper while you starve.
Exactly. And that scenario perfectly captures the tension that we're digging into today. We're weighing the pursuit of education or, knowledge against the pursuit of money and capital. It really boils down to one central question. Is the accumulation of knowledge the ultimate blueprint for a successful, secure life? Or is the accumulation of capital the more powerful, practical enabler of human flourishing?
Right, and it's a profound divide.
It really is. And from my part, I argue that education is the supreme, unlossable asset. It's the framework that builds the individual, drives societal innovation, and crucially, gives us the capacity to safely manage whatever wealth we do actually acquire.
And I contend that money is the indispensable fuel of life. It provides immediate security, continually rising levels of happiness, and, practical opportunities that formal schooling often completely fails to deliver. Having the map is great in theory, but capital is what actually moves you forward.
So to set the baseline here, we have to understand education not just as like a piece of paper or a credential. It's the foundational asset of human existence. Returning to our opening analogy, life is a grand, highly unpredictable adventure.
Very unpredictable.
Right. And education is that detailed map, but it's also more than that. It's the cognitive architecture you use to navigate the world. By exposing your brain to diverse disciplines, logic, critical analysis, you are physically rewiring how you process information and evaluate risk. You're basically upgrading your mental operating system.
Upgrading the operating system? Okay.
Yeah, it builds problem-solving skills, and we know it consistently yields the kind of, technological and social innovations that boost global economic growth. It's an investment that can't be stolen from you.
I don't disagree that learning is valuable, but I come at it from a different way. That mental operating system you're talking about is a beautiful, intricate machine. But again, a machine is entirely useless if you don't have the electricity to power it. Money is that power.
But without the machine...
We can theorize all day about cognitive architecture and problem-solving skills, but let's examine the empirical reality of the ultra-successful. If education is the ultimate blueprint, how do we explain the fact that so many of the individuals shaping our modern world bypassed it entirely?
You're referring to the billionaire dropout trope, I assume?
It's not just a trope, though. It's a measurable reality. Like research from WealthX found that nearly a third of the world's billionaires completely lack a bachelor's degree. We're talking about historical and contemporary titans here. Consider Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, John D. Rockefeller, Larry Ellison.
Sure, but...
These are individuals who actively abandon higher education, often walking away from really prestigious institutions. Why? Because they recognize that practical hustle and the direct acquisition of capital outpaced formal academic theories. I mean, Larry Ellison dropped out of college twice. Henry Ford left a farm at 16 to work in a machine shop.
Right.
A degree without money leaves an individual incredibly vulnerable to the physical and economic realities of the world. Capital, on the other hand, immediately solves your base physiological and safety needs, and it secures absolute freedom of choice.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective on this. The narrative that Jobs or Ford succeeded because they lacked education, or that they proved capital is superior to knowledge, is fundamentally flawed. When we actually analyze those incredibly successful dropouts, we realize they weren't uneducated at all. They were relentless autodidacts.
Autodidacts, sure, but they weren't relying on formal academic structures.
Because education is vastly broader than traditional schooling. They created their own highly rigorous informal curriculum of, street smarts, engineering, and market dynamics. They spent thousands of hours reading, experimenting, failing.
Yeah, they learned by doing.
Exactly. That process of rapid, real-world hypothesis testing is literally the scientific method in action. Isn't their success ultimately a testament to the power of relentless learning and intellectual curiosity, rather than proof that money is intrinsically superior to knowledge? They had to build a mental map before they could accumulate the capital.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. By expanding the definition of education to include literally any instance of human trial and error, you're diluting the concept to the point of meaninglessness.
I don't think it's meaningless.
Well, if survival instinct and basic hustle are now categorized as education, then we aren't even debating the same thing. The reality is that academic institutions heavily focus on theory while utterly failing to teach practical, real-world utility, particularly financial literacy.
I wouldn't say they utterly fail.
They do, though. We see this constantly. Highly educated people, professionals with advanced degrees, they often struggle to make ends meet because they were taught how to, analyze literature or chart historical macroeconomic trends, but not how to manage a personal budget or invest in cash-flowing assets or generate capital.
That's a fair criticism of modern curricula, yeah.
Right. They have the map, but they are starving in the jungle. Schools simply don't teach the practical money skills required to survive, so the individual has to go out and acquire capital to brute force their survival.
Okay, but if you want proof of what capital looks like without that underlying educational foundation, whether formal or self-taught, examine the classic examples of sudden wealth. Take lottery winners or heirs to massive fortunes who mismanage and quickly squander their inheritances.
Well, sudden wealth is a bit of an anomaly.
But statistically, a staggering number of lottery winners end up bankrupt within a few years. Why? They have all the fuel in the world, they have the capital you champion, but because they lack the intellect, the financial frameworks, and the critical thinking skills to protect it and deploy it reasonably, the fuel simply burns them alive. The wealth vanishes because money without knowledge is inherently unstable.
It's true that sudden wealth can be destructive if mismanaged. I won't argue that someone lacks financial literacy if they blow $100 million in 3 years. But if we're evaluating what truly drives human flourishing, we have to look at the psychological outcomes of everyday people, not just lottery anomalies.
Okay.
There has long been this philosophical cliche that money can't buy happiness. Academics love to use it to justify the pursuit of esoteric knowledge over capital, but the actual data entirely disrupts that idea.
You're referring to the idea that money only buys necessities, and that beyond a certain point of basic comfort, true happiness comes from purpose, community, and relationships, because those are all elements that a well-rounded education helps cultivate?
No, I'm referring to the idea that there is a happiness plateau, which turns out to be largely a myth.
Ah, the Wharton study.
Exactly. For years, people cited Daniel Kahneman's 2010 study suggesting that happiness stalls at an income of about, $75,000 to $100,000. People use that to say, see, once your rent is paid, money doesn't matter. Go read philosophy. But let's look at the mechanism behind that old study. It relied on retrospective memory, asking people how they felt last week or last month. Human memory is notoriously biased. We remember peaks and ends, not our day-to-day baseline.
Right. Memory bias heavily skews self-reported emotional states. That's well documented.
Exactly. So recently there was an adversarial collaboration study out of Wharton conducted by Matthew Killingsworth along with Kahneman himself. Killingsworth used a real-time app called Track Your Happiness to ping participants randomly throughout the day and measure their actual in-the-moment emotional well-being. This eliminated the memory bias entirely.
And the results were pretty striking.
They were profound. When they reconciled the data, the findings showed that for the vast majority of people, larger incomes are associated with ever-increasing levels of happiness, with absolutely no plateau. The line just keeps going up into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
But there was an exception in that study, wasn't there?
Yes, only a very specific, already miserable minority sees their emotional well-being stall at the $100,000 mark. For the other 80% of the population, more money translates directly to higher day-to-day happiness. Capital doesn't just buy survival, it scales directly with our psychological well-being. It removes the daily micro-stresses, the broken car, the unexpected medical bill, the anxiety of grocery prices that actively degrade a person's quality of life.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. Even Killingsworth himself noted in that study that money is just one determinant of happiness. He explicitly stated it is not the be-all, end-all. The data shows a strong correlation, certainly, because as you noted, money removes friction and specific stress points. But removing stress is not the same as injecting meaning.
If you're constantly stressed about eviction, you don't have the luxury of searching for meaning, though.
True. But doesn't education provide the ethical framework and the critical thinking necessary to translate that capital into a genuinely meaningful existence once the baseline is met? I mean, aimlessly accumulating wealth, even if it provides a continuous hit of emotional security, lacks a broader societal or moral purpose. Education gives you the lens to decide how that money should be deployed. It gives you the ability to engage with art, philosophy, civic duty, philanthropy. Without an educated mind, capital is just a hoard of resources. You're sitting on a mountain of fuel, but you have nowhere interesting to drive.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the brutal reality of economic shifts? You speak of education as an unlosable asset, and earlier you used the analogy of upgrading an operating system.
I did, yes.
Overnight. The specific utility of a formal education is actually incredibly fragile. Money allows individuals immediate freedom and the concrete capacity to survive macroeconomic downturns. An education or a degree, on the other hand, can become entirely obsolete in a matter of months.
Obsolete in months? Come on, that's quite a stretch. Foundational knowledge doesn't just evaporate.
Specialized knowledge does, and that's what people pay for. Think about the rise of generative artificial intelligence and advanced automation right now. We're seeing highly educated white-collar professionals, programmers, financial analysts, commercial writers, paralegals, facing the terrifying reality that the specialized knowledge they spent years and tens of thousands of dollars acquiring can now be replicated by a machine in seconds.
It's a disruption, certainly.
It's more than a disruption. If a lawyer spends $200,000 on a law degree and an AI can do 80% of their contract analysis, the ROI on that education just collapsed. In an unpredictable world, a bank account full of capital provides a highly flexible buffer. You can use cash to buy time. An obsolete degree provides no runway at all.
I hear you. But let's break down what's actually happening with automation. Who is inventing that automation? Who is designing the neural networks, training the artificial intelligence? And who possesses the cognitive flexibility to adapt to this newly automated economy? It is the educated individual.
But the average educated person isn't designing neural networks.
No, but the specific technical skill, like writing a basic line of code or drafting a standard contract, might become obsolete. Education in its truest form, however, teaches you the meta skill of adaptation. It is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
But pivoting takes time. If you lose your job to an algorithm, the cognitive flexibility to learn a new skill doesn't pay your mortgage next week. Capital does. Cash doesn't care if an AI wrote the code. It remains a universally accepted unit of value.
Cash provides the runway, yes, but without the cognitive flexibility to figure out what to pivot to, you're just going to burn through that runway until you're destitute. The educated mind looks at the AI and says, how can I leverage this tool to make myself more productive? Furthermore, if we zoom out from the individual to society, education drives all major societal advancements. It forms the moral compass that dictates how we integrate these massive technological shifts.
I'm not sure history supports the idea that educated societies always act morally with their technology, to be honest.
Perhaps not perfectly, no, but education provides the framework to even have the debate. It asks the ethical questions. Will the wealth generated by automation be used responsibly to benefit the broader community? Or will it be hoarded selfishly by a few tech monopolies, creating a sort of techno-feudalism? Without the ethical considerations embedded in a comprehensive education, the very capital you champion becomes an instrument of severe inequality and exploitation. Education is the safeguard against the darkest impulses of unchecked capitalism.
Yet it is capital that actually funds the laboratories, the university endowments, and the massive research grants that make that advanced education and AI development possible. You can't separate the two. You talk about education guiding the ethical use of capital, but without capital, those universities and research centers simply don't exist. The two are constantly interacting.
They are interconnected, yes.
But if we're forced to choose the foundation of a successful life, I stand by my point. The absence of money creates a state of immediate physical crisis that the presence of education simply cannot fix in the short term. Try philosophizing about techno-feudalism when you can't pay for housing or healthcare. Capital cuts through the theory and solves the immediate physical reality of human existence.
Which is exactly why we can't separate them entirely. It seems our disagreement naturally leads us to a specific intersection. You're acknowledging that sudden wealth without knowledge leads to ruin, and I'm acknowledging that profound knowledge without resources leaves you incredibly vulnerable to immediate physical needs.
Right. I'm not suggesting people should be proudly ignorant, just that we fundamentally overvalue institutional education and undervalue the sheer utility of capital. But if there is a bridge between our positions, we really have to talk about financial literacy.
Exactly. I completely agree.
It really is the exact intersection where education and money meet. It's a highly specialized form of education that focuses exclusively on the mechanics of capital. An educated mind that is specifically equipped with capital and possesses the practical knowledge of how to manage, protect, and grow it, well, that represents the ideal state. That's what the autodidact billionaires figured out.
I fully agree with that. Financial literacy requires both the mathematical and analytical frameworks provided by education and the actual resources provided by capital to mean anything. So, to summarize my position in light of our back and forth today, education remains the unlosable foundation of a good life. It is the ultimate compass that guides human development. It protects us from squandering our resources, whether they be intellectual or financial, and it uniquely equips us to navigate, adapt to, and ultimately shape an unpredictable world. It's the map that gives the journey meaning and the operating system that allows us to process change.
And to summarize my stance, money provides the tangible, undeniable fuel for that journey. Formal education can often be an expensive detour that fails to teach practical survival. Capital, conversely, provides direct security. As the Wharton data shows, it consistently scales with human happiness for the vast majority of people, actively removing daily miseries. Most importantly, it enables real-world action and freedom that a purely theoretical mindset simply can't achieve on its own.
The balance between the pursuit of knowledge and the practical necessity of wealth is one of the oldest complexities of the human experience. We leave it to you, the listener, to form your own conclusion about which pursuit ultimately defines the primary path to success. There is so much more to explore within the nuances of human flourishing, and we've really only scratched the surface today.
You really have to ask yourself what you truly need to navigate the unknown.
Exactly. When you are standing at the edge of that dense jungle, looking into the uncharted territory of your own life, you have to decide what's going to get you through, the map or the fuel.